Hi, third graders. It's Mrs. Linderman. Welcome back. We are still continuing our talk about personal narratives. And if you remember, the other day on Monday, we read the story Fireflies by Julie Brinklow and learned a little bit about the boy in the story. And remember, these are personal narratives with a turning point. So remember, that turning point is when the character learns something, right? They change throughout the story. And in Fireflies, the boy caught all of those fireflies in the jar, right? And then he, at the end of the story, realized their light was going out. They were starting to die. So, as much fun as he had catching them and keeping them in that jar, he realized he really needed to let these insects go so that they could breathe and they could be free in nature. So, that was the turning point in that story when he realized, even though he loved them, he had to let them go. Do you remember then the next day we read about Sister Anne's hands? Remember, Sister Anne is a Black teacher and she was working in a white school. And these people were not very nice to her, or a lot of them were not very nice to her, just because of the color of her skin. And in this story, remember the young girl, her name was Anna. Towards the end of the story, she realized how much she could learn from Sister Anne, even though some people did not want to learn from her because she had different colored skin. So remember, Anna drew a picture for her, and Anna realized that we need to treat everybody the same, no matter what their skin color is, because we're all the same on the inside. So this is a story that Anna told us, and she learned something. So there was a turning point in this story. And you're going to be writing a personal narrative about something that happened in your life. And remember, it's a time when you learned a lesson. So you're going to need to think about that as you're generating some ideas. So let's look. We started on this page, right? I'm going to move my camera up a little bit if I can. We wrote this personal narrative kind of introduction in our book. And then we added some things along the way, right? What makes a strong personal narrative? We talked about the important parts that it has to have, right? The main character is the one telling the story. That's you. The author uses words. You use words like I and me and my. It shows us that you're the one telling the story. It's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. Quite often there's conversation, right? And it includes that turning point, that something important that happens to the character in that story where they learn something, right? They learn that lesson and they actually change from the beginning to the end of the story. Okay, so today I'm going to have you on the next page, and you can do it on the back if you would like, okay, so that you don't waste some paper. I'm going to have you draw and label that page because you're going to start to think about different people in your life and different experiences with those people, or maybe you learned a lesson. Okay, so I might put like my grandma in here. I used to visit my grandma in the summers. Some experiences that we had together, and what did I learn from those experiences? Okay, so special people. I want you to pause this and I want you to draw the title Special People, and then a couple of webs, because you might think about a couple of different people that you've learned something from. Okay, and you've got some ideas where you could put those ideas down. So I want you to do that on the back of a page. Okay, and that's going to be one way you can generate some ideas, special people in your life. So pause the video and draw that. Okay, on your next page, I'm going to have you generate some ideas when you had some strong emotions. And we're going to work today, or you're going to work today on your own, kind of coming up with some ideas about those special people. And then times when you had some strong emotions. So think about, is there a time when you were nervous? Okay, so maybe it was, riding a roller coaster. And that made you nervous. Okay, if I'm riding a roller coaster, what would I learn in that story? What would I learn about being nervous and still doing something, right? Maybe I learn in the end that I need to take chances and try new things to have fun. Okay, maybe there's a time when you were really angry and you learned something from that time. Okay, think about that. Did you break a toy, or did a sibling or a friend break something of yours? Okay, maybe that's a time when you were angry and you learned something in that story. Can you think about some times when you were scared, or maybe you were proud, right? Maybe you won a race, or maybe you played in a game, a soccer game or a basketball game or something, right? And you got done and you were really proud of yourself. So you actually worked really hard to achieve a goal. And in the end, you were proud. Maybe there's a time you were embarrassed. That happens to all of us, right? What did you learn from that situation? Or a time when you were determined. That means you didn't want to give up. You just kept trying and you were determined. How about a time you were excited? Or a time that you were worried, right? Think about all those different strong emotions, and maybe you can come up with some other emotions that you could add to it as well. But I want you to try to think of one experience that's tied to this emotion where you learned something, right? Thinking about being embarrassed. Maybe you were afraid to try something for the first time, or maybe it was like a dance recital and you were embarrassed because you're in front of all these people, but in the end, right, you did a great job. You learned something new. You got over your fear. Okay, you could write about that. That might be a time when you had some strong emotions. So today, your assignment is to start to generate ideas. Now, do you have to get it completely finished? No, because you might not be able to think of everything, but I want you to give it a good shot. Think about somebody that you've learned something from, okay? Somebody that maybe taught you something, or an experience that you had. You've got 2 spots, so you can add 2 different people. And then I want you to write down these emotions, and maybe you've got other emotions that you can think of that would make a really good personal narrative. So that's your job for today, is to start generating ideas. Okay. And you're going to add to this. This isn't the end of it. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about some other ways that we can generate ideas for those personal narratives, thinking about a time when we learned something in our lives.